business experience, and we're keeping an eye on the bedlam on the streets and people being attacked.
No, but on college campuses. I think where you've seen a spike, which I was speaking to specifically, is college campuses. We've seen that at University of Pennsylvania, at Columbia. We've seen it at NYU.
Most of that is writing on the walls or
there's also great fear.
Like that.
But putting signs up that say white.
I'm not condoning it. I just don't want to give a false impression.
No. On campuses.
I think some of it's more subtle. I don't think it necessarily gets covered by the media, but there's tremendous fear out there. You know, I just went to a restaurant in my neighborhood, and the person came out and said, you know, my cook's 8-year-old son came to him, and he's an undocumented immigrant, and was crying and said, Daddy, are they going to send you away? Am I never going to have you? And I think that fear is coursing through America, and I think it's part of the reason that you see these protests in the streets. People, when you talked about Donald Trump saying he'll change his rhetoric, you know, it's not just that this was just campaign rhetoric where you're attacking the other side. This was bigotry, racism, hatred, misogyny, and all repeatedly. And so there's the reason people are out in the streets, and I was out in the streets with people, and I commend them for being in the streets.
Underway right now, the third night demonstrations. Earlier this week, a massive protest ended in front of Trump Tower here in New York, the president-elect's home and headquarters obviously for his business empire. The skyscraper has turned into a fortress of sorts in the middle of Manhattan, with new restrictions in place for people, vehicles, even aircraft flying overhead. Phil Mattingly reports.
Tonight, the residence of the president-elect, Trump Tower, is a fortress ringed by tight security, the center of an increasingly worrisome question. How do you secure a 58-story skyscraper smack in the center of one of the world's busiest cities? It's a question made even more difficult by the fact the building's atrium is a public space, increasingly difficult to monitor, law enforcement officials say. And the building itself, a target as recently as this year of a suction cup climber, seen as potentially vulnerable to any number of threats from surrounding towers and streets.
Because it is so dense, you know, the damage it could cause is potentially immense. So they're going to have their work cut out for them here for quite some time.
The FAA already moving to protect it from the air, issuing temporary flight restrictions that extend nearly 3,000 feet up and 2 nautical miles out. In the wake of election night, new cement barriers and sand-filled dump trucks line busy Fifth Avenue, pushing cars and the public further away. Now, a Secret Service presence throughout the building, and a regular presence of more than 100 NYPD officers surrounding the property. A debate between Secret Service and NYPD officials still ongoing over even more restrictive actions to take. Concerns exacerbated by the now constant presence of protesters, a group now given their own pin right across the street from the building's main entrance.
Victory over Hillary Clinton Tuesday night, a number of NBA head coaches have been asked for their reactions. Boston's Brad Stevens said, I've always been told not to talk about politics and religion. Those are hard not to talk about right now. It wasn't my vote. Let's put it that way. Portland's Terry Stotts. I hope the country works out. It certainly wouldn't have been my choice. And the Clippers' Doc Rivers. Donald Trump is going to be fine as president. That's something I never thought I would have to say, honestly. At the end of the day, he will be, because I just believe that America overall works. There's a Congress and a Senate, and it's going to work out. If you don't like it, change it by either running or voting. Don't get mad. Go do something. And then there were the comments by the Pistons' Stan Van Gundy and Golden State's Steve Kerr. Listen.
Our society has said, no, we think you should be second-class citizens. We want you to be second-class citizens, and we embrace a guy who is openly misogynist as our leader. I don't know how we get past that. I mean, you know, Martin Luther King said what, like the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. I would have believed in that for a long time, but not today. It's been a long way away from justice right now, and what we have done to minorities and women in this election is despicable.
I thought it took a lot of guts for Stan to say what he did, and you know, I think a lot of us feel similarly. For me, probably the biggest disappointment with this whole election was the level of discourse. You know, there should be some level of decorum and respect and dignity that goes with, you the election of the presidency, and it was like went out the window. I'm disappointed in the lack of respect and dignity that's involved, and it's the way it goes.
We're going to talk about what all of you have been talking about, election night 2016. Guys, we're going to have to keep this to 2.5 minutes apiece so everybody can talk, and we're going to start, Chuck, down there in Miami with you. You got the floor.
Well, Ernie, it's been kind of shell shock, to be honest with you, the last 48 hours with Mr. Trump at the election results. That being said, we got to move on. I was disappointed because my candidate didn't win, number one. But like I say, it's over now. He's going to be the president of the United States. We have to respect the office. And we have to acknowledge that he made so many of those misogynistic, racist remarks and narcissistic remarks. So you have to acknowledge that. And that's what's, I think, disheartening to the people who did not vote for him, like myself, is this disheartening because it feels like he enabled the workers of iniquity. Those people who don't really understand the bigger value. And so he gave them a forum and a platform that typically they don't have. And it felt like that you lock arms with them over policy, over your moral line. And I felt that the moral line for me, it wasn't about a Republican vote or a Democratic vote for me, Ernie. Obviously, it was about, he had crossed a moral line ethically that regardless of the policies that I wanted to be in place, I couldn't be locked armed with because of those things that he did with him. And he has to change that. And he has to make it inclusive, but it's very tough for him because, Shaq, I think this, it's kind of, I liken it to the guy who's a narcissist in high school and he wins the homecoming king. He really doesn't get humble after that. And so he has to.
In a democracy, I'm 45 years old and the world is more divided now than it's ever been. There's a lot of stuff going on. It's my hope and prayer that him as the leader of the free world bring people closer together. It's kind of hard to believe that a guy with no political experience is the president of the United States. That's what's really hard to believe.
I've got kind of a three-part take on this after watching what we all watched on Tuesday. Number one, when this campaign season started, I felt like I'd been dealt a bad hand. I had these couple of choices. And there were trust issues with Hillary Clinton I couldn't get past. And there was this inflammatory rhetoric from Donald Trump, which to me was incomprehensible and indefensible. I couldn't vote for either one. For the first time in going to the polls for 42 years, I hit the write-in button. And I voted for John Kasich. And I left knowing that John Kasich wasn't going to win. But I left with a clear conscience because I hadn't settled. Number two, I'm hopeful. I watched the video today at CNN on what was going on at the White House with Donald Trump, President Obama. I was hopeful and I was encouraged that there will be a difference between the President Trump and the campaigning Trump. And I'm with these guys. We have to give them a chance. But here's the deal. I just hope that he's all in fixing the wounds in this country and the divides that separate this country. And I want to be part of that too. And for me to be part of it, I have to look in the mirror and I have to say, how am I going to be a better man? How am I going to be a better neighbor? How am I going to be a better citizen? How am I going to be a better American? How can I be a fountain and not a drain? And number three, I know you're not supposed to talk about politics and religion, but we're already talking about politics, and so I'm going to go the R direction too. I never know from one election to the next who's going to be in the Oval Office, but I always know who's on the throne. And I'm on this earth because God created me, and that's who I answer to. I'm a Christian. I follow this guy named Jesus. You might have heard of him. And the greatest commandment he gave me was to love others. And Scripture also tells us to pray for our leaders. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to pray for Donald Trump. I'm going to pray for all those people right now who feel like they're on the outside looking in, who are afraid at this point. Pray for them too. In short, I'm praying for America. And I'm praying that one day we're going to look back and we're going to say, you know what? That Donald Trump presidency, that was all right. But I'm praying.